I've been talking a lot about tea. I've been trying teas and doing unboxing of teas that I've gotten, but I haven't explained what tea is. So, what is tea? Well, tea is technically, if we're being very specific and scientific about it, is a plant, Camellia sinensis. And there's a few different kinds of Camellia sinensis. There's Camellia sinensis and Camellia sinensis assamica, and there's a few other ones, Camellia sinensis and assamica being the most popular. What a lot of people don't realize is that all tea comes from that plant, the Camellia sinensis. So you're talking about white tea, green tea, oolong tea, black tea, pu'er tea, yellow tea, which I don't have with me. All of these things come from the same plant. Now, when you talk about herbal teas, a lot of people get irked when you say herbal tea, because tea is supposed to be just from the Camellia sinensis plant, and we, especially in America, have kind of made it anything that goes in hot water is tea, but it's not quite accurate. Some people call these a tisane, which is a fancy name. And some people call it like an herbal infusion. Some people call them an infusion. I'm not upset by people calling it herbal tea because it's tea. It goes in water, it does a lot of the same things, but we do have to make the distinction that it's not Camellia sinensis. It's not the tea plant. This is the tea plant. So let's look at the kinds of tea that there are. There are 6 major kinds of tea. And that is white tea, green tea, yellow tea, and she's missing, oolong tea, black tea, and pu'er tea. And these are like the main 6. And then you have all of your herbal infusions, which I would love to talk about in another video, but not this one. So let's start with the 8 processes that go into making tea. Now, all of these teas won't do all of these processes. Some of them will do none of them, not none of them. All of them are going to be processed in some way, but they're not all going to do all of those processes. I think that the first process, maybe this is 0 because I didn't consider it in the 8, is picking the tea, actually going out and picking the tea. The second is withering or wilting. So it's letting the tea kind of like lose some of its moisture and curl up, like the leaves are doing right now. It's fall. So the leaves are falling and they're withering or wilting on the ground. The second process is bruising. So when you bruise the tea leaves, it releases different chemical compounds. It allows cell walls to break down and chemicals to interact with each other in really cool and interesting ways. And it also helps in the oxidation. I always say it wrong. The oxidation process. So when you bruise or tear or rip or punch tea leaves, that makes them oxidize faster. So the oxidation process is one of those processes. And then the fixation process, which is the 4th process, halts that oxidation process. So some of these are not oxidized, and so you have to halt that process. Some of these are mildly oxidized, fully oxidized, so whatever stage of that process, it needs to be stopped at some point. The 5th and very rare process is yellowing or sweltering. So the tea that we don't have here, the yellow tea, which is a really lovely, rare, expensive tea, which is why we don't have it here, it's piled into piles that let it do whatever this is. Steam, swelter, it just keeps the heat going and it turns them yellow, hence yellowing. The 6th process is shaping, which also impacts flavor. It impacts the way that a tea unravels, it unpacks. Flavors are being unpacked, so you could say that it's unpacking. It also continues to release some different yummy chemicals that we as humans like. Most humans. There's people that don't like tea, which is fine. But, why are you here? I don't know. Maybe you just like to learn, and that's fine. Hey, come on in. Come on, sit down, take a seat. The 7th process is drying. So In all of these processes, there is, in a lot of these processes, there has been a release of moisture. So the processes are trying to get the tea as close as possible to a low moisture content so that they can be packaged and sent everywhere, and then you steep them in water. But they have to be very low in moisture. So that's the drying process. Most of all, the drying process. It also loses moisture in other processes, but the drying process is the drying process. And then the last process is fermenting or aging, which doesn't happen to all teas. I mean, I guess all teas will age because once the process is done, then they still continue to mellow or change flavors a little bit. But what we're really talking about with aging is kind of this fermentation process, right? So in pu'er teas, they are fermented, which can happen in a bunch of different ways. It doesn't have to happen to all of these teas, mostly pu'er teas. So those are the processes that it takes to make different kinds of tea. And now, let's look at some teas. I've been looking at these all the time. You can see how different they are. They look like they're from different plants, honestly. And they taste like they're from different plants too. But it's all because of those processes. It's all of those processes that make a tea what it is. Let's start first with this white tea. You can see all of the different colors in it. It looks like a fall tapestry. Ooh, a tapestry. This one's good because it has buds in it. You can see these little tiny buds. Some white teas are only buds, but this is buds and leaves. It's usually buds and the first two leaves or the first one leaf. And you can see how these leaves are still green. Some of them are like brown. That's because of the withering process. Some white teas are withered outside in the sun. There's not a hard and fast rule or definition of what a white tea is. It's actually kind of still. It's one of the newer kinds of tea, which is funny to say because it's hundreds of years old, but it's not as old as green tea or pu'er tea. But you can tell how minimally processed this is. It looks like a pile of leaves. And that's because the only processes that a white tea will go through is this withering, sometimes minimal shaping. They can be baked too, to continue to like cook off that moisture content, but they're very minimally processed usually. So sometimes they look like a pile of leaves. Sometimes it's just these little buds that's called silver needle. Silver needle tea is just these buds. And you can see why they're called silver needle because they're pretty silver. And they have these little hairs on them. It's very soft. Oh. It smells very fall. It smells very pile of leaves. Like if you're ever raking leaves in the fall and you get a whiff of that, fresh, dried leaves, the ones that haven't sat under, with moisture, they're very dry. That's what this smells like. It smells beautiful. I'm sure it's delicious and we will be able to taste it very soon, but I wanted to explain tea first. I got ahead of myself. I always do. Let's go to green tea. This is my favorite kind of tea. I love green teas. Chinese green teas are my favorite. I also love Japanese green teas. I haven't had too many Korean green teas, and I haven't had too many green teas from Africa or Southeast Asia either. So I need to branch out. But those are usually, most of those teas are mostly like black teas. It's not common to find green teas there. But you can see why it's called green tea is because it's very green. And that is because it's not wilted, it's not withered like these white teas. The white teas are allowed to kind of sit out and curl up and dry. But green tea is the reason for green tea is to keep it green, to keep it fresh. And so usually the leaves are plucked and then processed right away, not withered. Now everything that I say has an asterisk because there are many different types of tea and many different producers who do different things. So you're gonna get a mix of some of these processes. Some of them are going to not happen to some and some to others, but these are like boilerplate, ground rules kind of things. Green teas, plucked, put right into the halting process, which is to halt oxidation or the fixation process. In a lot of Japanese green teas, they're steamed, which gives them, yum, fresh, maybe grassy notes. Whereas this is longjing. This is a popular green tea from China. The fixation process is actually pan fired. Like this one, they actually push it against the side of the pan to flatten it. That keeps the oxidation process from starting. With green teas, we don't want oxidation. So that's why they stay so green and fresh. So the processes for green tea: pluck, either pan or steam them to stop the oxidation process from happening, and then shaping them. So with Japanese green teas like sencha or gyokuro, they are rolled into thin, tiny, almost like just precious little needles. And they're so beautiful and they smell so good. These are, again, pushed to be flat like this. And I think that it's just gorgeous. They're kind of shiny, you can see, they're kind of shimmering. And it tastes, it smells like grass, but also a little nutty because it was fired instead of steamed. So we're getting kind of like nutty notes, but also hay, a little bit of hay. I would say hay more than nutty. Maybe nutty was a nutty thing to say. Delicious. It's gonna be amazing. So that's green tea. So we've only talked about teas so far that are not oxidized. Now, as you can see, we're getting darker. So this is when the oxidation process starts happening. This is an oolong. You can see it's kind of coiled and crumpled and all of that stuff. Sometimes it's rolled into balls, but this is kind of just like wiry a little bit, like little wires, but it is shaped that way on purpose. So with oolong, the process is you pick the tea and then you kind of rough it up a little bit. You bruise it because that helps release some different chemicals and helps them interact with each other. And then it also kickstarts the oxidation process. So oolongs are oxidized anywhere in between no oxidation and full oxidation. So black teas are full oxidation. Anything under that or above no oxidation, like these two, is an oolong. Then once the producer has the right amount of oxidation happening that they want to make their tea, then they'll fix it. They'll heat the tea, like with the green tea, to stop the oxidation process from happening any further. And then they'll shape it. So like I said, sometimes they're in balls, sometimes they're these little wiry things. Shaping an oolong particularly is really important because oolongs have a way of unraveling their flavors as you brew them multiple times. So a lot of people will pour hot water over the oolong, drain it, and then throw that away because the oolong tea hasn't opened up enough yet to really give its flavor. I like to drink that, but that's just me. And then the second brew you pour and it opens up a little more and you have different flavors, and then you pour more and it's different flavors. And that's thanks to the shaping process. Now we're getting nutty. We're getting like roasted nuts, like sugary almost. Oh, this is sweet. It's so sweet. These were this was more fall, autumn, dry leaves. This was very grassy. The green tea was very grassy and fresh. This is nutty and sugary and delicious smelling. The next tea that we have is a black tea, whereas the oolong was kind of anywhere in between not oxidized, like the green tea, or fully oxidized, like this tea. The oolong was somewhere in between. Black tea is fully oxidized. So as dark as you can get the leaves, that's where the black teas live. So for black tea, you pick off the tea leaves, you oxidize them. After bruising them, you bruise them, you rough them up a little bit. Sometimes you tear them and then you let them oxidize. And since they're fully oxidized, we don't have to stop the oxidization process like we did with the green tea and the oolong tea, where for the green tea, we didn't want any oxidation. And for the oolong tea, we wanted to be able to control the oxidation. This is already fully oxidized, so we don't need to stop anything from happening. It's already fully oxidized. So we can go right to the shaping process. Some black teas can be in pieces. Some black teas are full leaves. Like this one has quite a lot of like full leaves. This one even has like a leaf and a stem and a bud. So once they're shaped, however they're going to be shaped, then they're dried. And you get a tea like this. This one is minimally processed, really. I mean, some black teas like over there are very thin. They roll them really, really thin. Some have golden tips on them. Some are literally, I've had tea that's just like crunched, like little crunches of tea. That's not a really high quality tea, but I had it. So we're getting even darker notes now. We're getting burnt sugar. We're getting darkly roasted nuts. You know, I guess in the oolong we had like lightly roasted nuts. But these are like put right over a coal fire kind of nuts. I also smell molasses. All of your kind of deep dark flavors. Ooh, this is the deep dark flavors. Love black tea. I've never really seen one like this before. That's really interesting that you have all of these different variations. And then the last tea that we're going to talk about, since we don't have a yellow tea. So a yellow tea would be somewhere near this green tea. It's basically processed the same way as a green tea, only it is then, after the oxidation process is halted, it's piled up into piles and allowed to steam and swelter in heat, in its own heat, and that yellows the leaves. But we don't have a yellow tea, again, because they're quite expensive and highly prized, rare. And this last tea that we're going to talk about is pu'er tea. Pu'er tea is usually, it can be kind of any one of these. Sometimes it's like a processed like a white tea, sometimes it is processed like a black tea. After that process, pu'ers kind of can go down two different paths. The raw path, the sheng pu'er path, which is allowed to ferment naturally. Naturally, I put in quotes because the other way is not unnatural, it's just helped along. The sheng pu'er is just kind of like not let out, but sits and ages itself. Whereas another path is shou pu'er, or cooked pu'er, or ripe pu'er. And for that path, you pile these wet leaves up, and you can add yeast or different bacterias and let it ferment in its heat. And that is why it's called cooked. It's faster than letting it sit by itself. This process allows it to get really funky real quick. And then it sits and it mellows out. This particular pu'er is the shang pu'er. So this is the raw pu'er. The one that's allowed to just chill. And you can see it looks a little bit like it was processed like a white tea because it doesn't look crazy oxidized. And you do see some hairs on these, so they might be buds. It looks a lot like it was processed like a white tea and then allowed to age. And the smell is really subtle. It's so interesting. Whereas the white tea was like a dry pile of fall leaves. Do you know when you're raking leaves and it sat maybe for a day because you didn't put it in bags or something, and it's wet on the inside, and you start raking again and it's a different smell now. It's not these dried leaves, it's kind of like wet, fermented leaves. That's what this is giving. Very subtly though. And I just wanted to give another example of how a pu'er tea can be sold, which is in these little cakes. So this is another raw pu'er where they've pressed the leaves into cakes and then let them age. So this is how it's naturally aged. You can also do this with cooked pu'er, where you let it ferment in these big piles and then you press them. Whereas a sheng pu'er like this is how it's going to age. And these can age for 50 years. I mean, these can age for a really long time. But this is like kind of a classic way for a pu'er to be sold. And you can just chip off pieces and serve that as tea. So let's do a quick, speedy recap. We have a white tea, which is minimally processed, withered, wilted, then kind of heated just to get rid of the moisture. Then we have a green tea, which is plucked and then immediately halted. The oxidation process is halted using either steam or dry heat. And then it's shaped and dried and delicious. For oolongs, it's picked and then allowed to be bruised and oxidized. And the oxidation process can go anywhere from very, very little oxidation to a lot of oxidation, but not fully oxidized. And then it's shaped usually into these little wires or into balls. It's delicious. It has so many different ranges of flavors because it can be oxidized at so many different levels. This one in particular gave kind of like apple-y, nutty notes. And then the black teas are then fully oxidized. So they're plucked, bruised, however they're going to be bruised, and then oxidized all of the way. So there's no fixation like with these two. It's shaped and dried and then sent to my door. And this one has dark roasty notes, molasses. And then you have a pu'er. So a pu'er is the one that's processed probably for the longest, right? So it's picked and then sometimes bruised, sometimes oxidized, and then it gets to the fermentation process where it's either packed up and let to age itself, or it's piled up into piles and sometimes has yeast or bacteria added to it to help the process of fermentation along. And then it can be put into cakes like you saw before. That's tea. It's all tea. This is all from the same plant. It's amazing. It's wild. That's one of the reasons that I love tea so much, is because it's so unique and versatile and can do so many things. And it's amazing that it comes from one plant. I'm always in awe of it. It brings me joy and makes me happy. So thank you for being open and willing to discovering, knowing what tea really is. It's amazing. I'm really happy to share that with you. And I hope that you join me for many more journeys about discovering more teas and tasting them and making it amazing. See you in the next one.